So we emigrated. Of course, coming from Lancashire, I had a mining background, although I wasn't a miner myself. I have members of the family who were and that sort of thing. The obvious choice was Southern Africa. Gold mines, diamond mines, copper mines, you know. So we went out there. And did reasonably well. Reasonably happy and plentiful life. And these racist instincts and unpleasant ideas that I'd harboured faded into a very hazy background. Because I'll tell you this, nobody could live in South Africa under the apartheid regime and not be, no, at least nobody that's part of humanity, and not be utterly sickened by it. Really was horrible. Remember one occasion, this has nothing to do with what I'm telling you about, but it'll let you know what it was like out there. We employed a lady who worked for us, and she shouldn't have, but we allowed her to sleep at our property. I could have gone to prison for it. Didn't notice, allowed her to sleep there. And she had a little girl called Gracie. She was a cosser. And Gracie used to play with my little girl, Susan. They're about the same age. Couldn't do it too publicly, but we used to play in our garden, which was quite sheltered and that sort of thing. And one day I went into a shop, and Gracie and her mum, Gladys, were just leaving the shop. Now, of course, my daughter called me Daddy. So Gracie thought Daddy was my name. Hello, Daddy! My God, you should have seen me. If looks could have killed me. Anyway, as I say, this all faded into the dim and distant past. And as anyone will tell you who's lived in Johannesburg during the 60s and 70s, you couldn't do that without coming into contact with members of the Jewish group out there. Absolutely massive Jewish population. Johannesburg had then. Don't know if it still has, but it certainly did then. And if you wanted to socialise at all, well, you couldn't do it without mixing with Jews. But I did mix with them, and I made some good friends amongst them. It was self-evident. They didn't have any horns, and perfectly decent, ordinary people. And I got on well with them. And all this faded. And I just forgot it. I gained a government qualification for mining and a reasonably successful career. And then, one day, it came to my attention that a group had been formed called the National Front of South Africa. I went along to a meeting, and at the request of some Jewish friends of mine, I joined them and kept my eyes open. Had a bit of information back. Well, that's all there was at that stage. But that resulted in my coming back to England and then being introduced to a man called Jerry Gable, who publishes a magazine called Searchlight, anti-fascist, anti-racist magazine, etc. He asked me if I would infiltrate the far right in this country, which I did. I was at the founding meeting of the British National Party in a hotel down here in London. I was wired up. Jerry was listening to every word of it in his car outside, sitting right next to John Tyndall on the top table. We knew everything. One of them went to the lavatory, we knew. We knew exactly what was happening. And of course, it didn't take them long to work out that they had a mole somewhere in a fairly high place. So, they decided that this mole had to be exposed and dealt with. And I know what they mean when they say dealt with. They decided that they were going to form a security branch and put a national officer of the party in charge of it, and he was to have all the facilities he needed, all the money he needed, all the resources he needed to root out this mole. They had to get it. And they kept their word. They did put a national officer of the party in charge of the security branch. Guess who? I found moles everywhere. Unbelievable. Civil War. Anyway, it was all quite amusing at that stage. But then we stumbled across something which was very, very serious. It was a plan to plant a bomb at the Notting Hill Carnival in 1982. Now, I'm not saying things that I can't prove or there's no evidence for. You can check this, it's in Hansard. Roy Hattersley, who was deputy leader of the Labour Party at the time, asked questions in the House of Commons about it. There were some arrests, but there were no convictions because of the manner in which I'd obtained the evidence. Got tape recordings as well. But no, wouldn't do. And there were no convictions. No, well, at least we stopped it, didn't we? Well, no, not really, we didn't. We delayed it. Anybody here know the name David Coupland? Raise your hands if you do. This is absolutely stunning. 10 years ago, David Coupland planted bombs in Brick Lane, bombs in Soho, bombs in Brixton, and when he was arrested, he said, "It's a pity you got me now." This is again a matter of public record, you can check it. "It's a pity you got me now. The next one, the biggest and the best, was for Golders Green." I'll leave it to your imagination why Golders Green. 17 people killed or very seriously injured. 17 people. Now, if I said to you here, have you ever heard of the Cray twins? I suggest every single hand would go up. They never killed anything like 17 people. Nothing like it. Coupland did, and not one of you have heard of him. Well, I'll turn that back, I think one of you has actually. But you see, you'd be wrong not to ask the obvious question. Here we have a fairly recently formed political movement, hoping to gain recognition and respectability at the ballot box. Why then would they go go planting mums. Not a lot of votes. Now, to understand this, you must understand the nature of modern fascism. Fascism is a philosophy. Perverted, yes. Doesn't matter. It's still a philosophy. And like all philosophies, it's fluid, it moves, it adapts, it changes shape, but it has a hard and fast core. And at the core of fascism is violent hatred of the Jews and minority groups, any man. Basically anti-Semitism kicks it all off. But don't you imagine for one moment that I'm suggesting that racism directed at a Jew is any, or religious hatred, is any worse than that directed at an Asian or a Muslim or me, for that matter. To paraphrase Shakespeare, prick me do I not bleed, did I? Of course I do. And the whole ethos of judging a man, or indeed a woman, on the basis of their race, their origins, the group which produced them, that is the nature of fascism. There's a new mob out now, isn't there? The EDL, the English Defence League. Think about this. Because exactly the same method to recruit and pervert and corrupt ordinary, decent, normally, working class white lads out there is exactly the same as I just related to you what happened to me 30, 40 years ago. It hasn't changed that much. They start off with what appears to be a perfectly reasonable thesis.